The Albatross by Scott Lauder.
The Albatross wasn't the most beautiful ship in the world, but Leveros Andreas didn't care. He was the ship's engineer, and everybody knew him as Levi. At 65, and after almost 50 years at sea, this was his final voyage. He couldn't wait to retire and use the money he had saved to buy a house in his hometown of Nikiti in Greece. He and the other two members of the crew were sailing toward the harbor town of Haven with their cargo of televisions. This was Levi's first time on the Albatross, but not his first time to visit Haven. Years before, when his wife was still alive, he had visited the little harbor town on the east coast of the United States with her. Those were happy years. Levi looked at the gold watch that his wife had given him for his 40th birthday. 1:14, he said. Usually, he tried to be in bed by 12, but Herman, the ship's cat, was missing. There was a storm coming, and he was worried. "I'll murder that cat when I find him," he said, shaking his head. There was only one more place to check: the cargo deck. He began climbing down the stairs to the lowest deck. He had almost reached the bottom step when he stopped. There, in front of him, the door to the cargo room lay half open. It was dark inside. Normally, the door was locked for security reasons. Levi thought about going to tell the captain immediately, but then he thought about Herman. "Herman! Hey! Herman!" Levi called from the door of the hold. "Are you in there?" He pulled out his flashlight. "Herman!" Levi called again. The flashlight shined only a few feet through the door and into the darkness, but Levi didn't really want to go any farther. The truth was, he was frightened of rats. This was one of the reasons why he liked Herman. Levi stood still. The ship was beginning to rise and fall more quickly now. The storm was getting closer. "Herman! Where are you?" Levi called out. The captain's orders were that no one was allowed to go into the cargo hold, but Levi had to find Herman. Hesitantly, Levi stepped forward, but he touched something with his foot. He jumped back and looked down. An apple core lay at his feet. At least it wasn't a rat. "Andre," thought Levi. Andre was always leaving these things lying around. He pictured Andre's face. Large and stupid were the words that immediately came into his mind. Andre and his friend Carlos were his two crewmates. Although it wasn't easy on a small ship, Levi tried to stay away from them as much as possible. "I should get out of here," he thought. "That crazy cat will have to find his own way out. I need to go and tell the captain about this door." Coo! The sound came from somewhere in the darkness. Coo! Coo! What was that? He whispered to himself. He shined his flashlight into the darkness and moved toward the sound. The sound came again, only louder. Hundreds of boxes were piled high on both sides of him, but there was a clear path through them, like a river through a canyon. Levi's mouth fell open. At the far end of the hold, a light came from a half-open door. "But that's impossible," he said. "There are no other rooms in the cargo hold." But there was another room, and there was another light, and it was drawing Levi forward like a moth toward a lamp. Outside the room, Levi stopped. He could feel his heart beating hard. He switched off his flashlight and leaned his head through the narrow doorway. The first thing he saw was a large sheet covering something. He stepped into the room. There were sheets everywhere. With one hand, he reached forward, and taking the nearest sheet, he pulled it off. A beautiful falcon with shining eyes stared back at him from its cage. "What on earth?" he said, and reached for the other sheets. Under each one, there were more birds. In all, Levi counted nearly 40 cages with one and sometimes two falcons in each. He was furious. These birds were special. There were laws to protect them from men like Andre. He thought about the police. If they find the birds, it'll mean trouble for all of us. I need to see the captain. Picking up the nearest cage, he walked out of the hold and back up the stairs to the captain's room. He knocked on the door and went straight in. Inside, the captain was sitting at a small desk, his ear to a cell phone. His big body made the room seem even smaller than it was. "What's going on?" he asked sharply when Levi walked in. "I'm sorry to disturb you," replied Levi, "but I found this in the hold." And he held up the cage. The captain stared at the falcon. "I'll call you back," he said into his cell phone. His dark eyes turned back to Levi. "What were you doing in the hold?" he asked. "I was looking for Herman," answered Levi, "and I found this. There are more than 40 cages down there." Silence. "It's Andre," Levi continued. "He's responsible." "Andre? What makes you think it's him?" "I found an apple." "And that means it's Andre?" the captain asked, a strange smile on his face. Levi didn't understand. This was serious. "Captain," he said, "these are rare birds. We could all go to jail for this." The captain seemed lost in thought. Levi spoke again. "Call the police," he said, "before they come onto the ship and find the birds for themselves." The captain nodded slowly. "Of course," he replied. "You're right." He moved around the table and put his arm around Levi's shoulder. "I'll call them. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. Okay?" Levi nodded. "Okay," he said, beginning to relax. "I'll take the bird to my room." The captain nodded, and Levi opened the door. "Thank you, Captain," he said. As soon as the door was closed and Levi was gone, the captain quickly called someone on his cell phone. "We have a problem," said the captain. Levi was walking along the corridor that led to his room. He wanted to put the falcon somewhere safe. All of a sudden, Herman ran past, tail in the air. "Hey!" shouted Levi. "Where are you going?" But Herman didn't stop. He continued at full speed and disappeared down the corridor. Levi laughed to himself. "Unbelievable! I thought birds were supposed to be scared of cats." Then Levi heard a noise behind him. He turned around quickly. Carlos and Andre stood a few feet away, both of them staring coldly at him. They looked big and heavy in their overalls. "Going somewhere?" asked Carlos. "To my room," replied Levi. Carlos smiled. He looked at the cage and said, "You have something that isn't yours." Levi felt threatened. He was too old to fight these two big guys. He tried to think of a way to get past them. "Do you know what time it is?" asked Andre suddenly. Levi looked at his watch. Almost 1:32 a.m. Suddenly, a sharp pain filled Levi's head, and everything went dark for a second. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on the floor, but he was still holding the cage. "You should give Carlos the falcon, old man," Andre said threateningly from behind Carlos's shoulder. Carlos pushed his face close to Levi's. When he spoke, the smell of his breath filled Levi's nose. "Don't make me hurt you, old man," he whispered, his green eyes shining. "Captain!" cried out Levi. "Captain!" In an instant, Carlos's hand was around Levi's throat, the other across his mouth. "Stupid old man," whispered Carlos. Andre grabbed the cage and tried to tear it from Levi's hand. The cage fell backward and crashed against the stairs that led to the deck above. The door of the cage swung open. "Catch it!" shouted Carlos, reaching out an arm. But it was too late. The falcon disappeared through the open door above them and into the night. A second later, the men turned back to Levi. Carlos's fists tightened. Andre knocked on the captain's door. Beside him, Carlos was rubbing his fists. "Come in." The men stepped inside. "Well?" asked the captain. Carlos and Andre looked at one another. "We had a slight problem," said Carlos. The captain stood up. "I know you had a problem." "Levi let the bird go," Andre lied. The captain slammed his hand on the desk. "That's $1,000 lost! You idiots!" Andre looked at the floor, but Carlos's eyes blazed. "Where is he?" continued the captain. "Where did you put him?" "Don't worry, we took care of him," replied Carlos. "We gave him a bath," laughed Andre like a child. "Man overboard!" The captain sat down again and looked out of the small window. A black sky greeted him. The old man was never part of their plans, and now he was dead. Fine, but if the police found his body quickly, they would be in trouble. The police would know that the old man hadn't drowned. "Don't worry, we've seen the last of him," said Carlos, reading the captain's thoughts. "I hope so," the captain said. "I certainly hope so."